Hey everyone, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and publisher at Autonomy Global. Can you believe we are at the end of July? And what an incredible month it's been. We've been talking about global ops all month, thanks to our sponsor, Fixar. And we're ending it on a really high note here with Godfrey Nolan, finally getting to work with Godfrey and his company, RIIS, the Research into Internet Systems. And we're going to tell you why he named it that and what it's all about here in a second. But Godfrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today and for telling us a little bit about the work that you do at RIIS. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask you specifically about you first, not your company. You tell us a little bit about your personal background.
Oh, well, I'm originally from Ireland and I've lived in lots of different countries over the years. I'm over here since the late 90s, and that's when I started the company over here. But basically, I've been running this company for 27, 28 years. We started off as kind of a mobile app dev, or web and then mobile app dev company. And then about 10 years ago, we got into drones. We came across this SDK and thought, well, this is interesting, and just basically started developing drones. And then I've been doing, I do a lot of teaching. So I teach at lots of different colleges around Southeast Michigan. And we use that to identify interns and also to bone up on the latest info. So that's usually really helpful for me. I've written a bunch of books. I seem to have a habit of writing a book a year for a while there. But I've given up on that now. That's kind of gone by the wayside these days. So mostly I just do online content and podcasts.
Well, I love all of that. And, what's your educational background that enables you to teach, like you said, and write these books and become the entrepreneur that you've become?
Well, I started off as a mech eng, but then I did a master's in computer science, which was in a very weird and obscure distributed processing systems in the UK in Bristol, which was I really enjoyed. So basically, I moved from the mech eng to the software side. And oddly enough, that really helps for the drone stuff because drones are both hardware and software. So I have a foot in both camps, and that seems to help really well. So that's kind of how I got to where I was. The reason we call it Research Internet Systems is because, well, it's from the 90s, so it's kind of a 90s name. But I always try to figure out what the next thing is. So every quarter we do like 3 different things that we throw at the wall and hope find which one the spaghetti sticks, and then we go after that. And that's actually how we got into drones. But so we still do that every quarter. We choose 3 different things. Mostly they're either drone stuff now, or sometimes they're kind of ChatGPT, LLM type things, because obviously that's where the future is going.
Okay, very cool. And I got to ask you, just because you're on my podcast, you mentioned you do podcasts as well. Can you tell everybody what your podcast is?
Yeah, the one in the drone spaces, we do a meetup every month, which is called just the Drone Software Meetup, and we have almost 1,300 members now, and they're all over the world. We cover all sorts of different topics, a lot of ATAC stuff. We're doing a couple of ATAC ones, but we do like how to program the DJI SDK, how to program the Parrot SDK, how to use PX4, how to use ROS2. So it's trying to get the fundamentals for all the different technologies, and then we put it up on YouTube, and we kind of try to improve the content each month. And sometimes we get inputs from other people, and sometimes we have people who come along and talk about their thing. We had somebody talk about a simulator from Intrepid the other month, which I thought was really good. So it's kind of a come all to anybody who's interested in drone development and wants to learn more about the software.
That's awesome. So you started in this kind of app space. You've got this Internet of Things in your title, if you will, of your company. But you kind of fell into the drone space with the SDK application. So again, forgive me, but for those that aren't super technical savvy, when you say SDK, just explain briefly what that means and why it's so important.
Sure. So if you think about 10 years ago, it was Phantom 3, Phantom 4 days. So you're using whatever it was. What was it back then? The DJI Go app. So we were looking at the DJI Go app, and it came clear to us that there was an SDK, which stands for a software development kit. So DJI had released this software development kit, which will allow anybody who could program in iOS and Swift or Objective-C back in the day, or on Android, to basically write their own version of the DJI Go, DJI Fly app. So it's basically, it's like if you could think about an SDK, it would be a headless app, and then you apply the user interface on top of it and get it to do what fun things that you want it to do. And the first things that people asked us to do, we were doing some agricultural apps where the farmers were taking pictures of their crops, and they were taking SD cards and putting it into laptops and uploading it to programs like PX4. And basically, we just streamlined that so that they could make it easier and they didn't have to worry about SD cards. So the SDK allows you to basically create a one-stop shop for taking the pictures and getting to whatever backend you want.
Okay, so that was the problem you were trying to
Yep.
solve, basically, not to have to use the cards and have more of a seamless integration. And I know, Godfrey, there's so many companies you work with. Some of them are sensitive and they don't really want you to talk about them. But just kind of give an example of those that you're able to talk about over the years, maybe some of the folks that you've helped along the way.
Sure. We started off with a company that was bought by AgEagle. They're a long time gone. And then our big break was when we started doing all these proof of concept apps. And then Skyward, we met them at one of the conferences. Skyward used to be funded by Verizon, so it was one of the first big apps that were out there that people could use and fly. And we had a bunch of people working on their mobile apps and then on their backend web portal. So we had one, and then we grew the portfolio to like 3 or 4. We worked with Measure for a long time and Mapware, and then it kind of exploded. So in the last few years, we're up to over 50 clients now. We have it's 54 at the last count, which is a couple of weeks back. And companies that we worked with a lot are Teal over the past few years. We worked with Aerodome before they got bought by Flock. And Rantizo is another big customer for us, where we did a lot of their helping with their web portal.
Yeah, so for everybody out there, this is the guy and the company behind the scenes making it all happen. You've probably seen Godfrey at some of these conferences and expos possibly, but you may not have fully appreciated if you didn't stop by his booth or take a minute to talk to him. Uh, Everywhere he is and all the things he's doing. Godfrey, I get to interview a lot of companies in the drone space. I'm so blessed to be able to do that, from manufacturers to pilot services across the board. And it seems like the main thing they all share in common is tackling some complex problems. You talked about this SDK problem and the reason why you started RIIS in the first place, kind of evolved into that drone space. As it's evolved over time, with some of these initial clients and now to today, where do you see RIIS fitting into the larger drone industry ecosystem?
So basically, we're kind of like the glue that holds a lot of this together. So like you said, a lot of the companies that are out there from A to Z, we've worked with. So the problem is that we find a lot of the time is that drone manufacturers are really good in the hardware space, but they may not necessarily be good in the software space. So they've developed a drone, then they want to figure out, okay, how do we get people to fly it? If it's using PX4, they probably use Q ground control. Then they might want to say, hey, we want to change Q ground control so it's got our own branding, or maybe we want our own version of Q ground control. So we're basically the glue that allows them to have the software so that somebody can actually use their drone or their sensor. We do a lot with sensors too as well, where somebody says, hey, we have this new sensor, a methane sensor or a new camera. We want to use it on our drone. How do we connect it? So we'll kind of like have one foot in both camps, where we'll do the hardware, the software, and make sure that what they get at the end of the day is something that works, that's easy to use, and that has a nice, clean user interface so that their customers don't ask them lots of support questions.
Okay, well, that's excellent. And clearly, this isn't a one size fits all approach. It sounds like it's very highly customized per client and what their mission is, what they're trying to achieve.
Oh yeah,
Um,
we get asked all the time about weird and wonderful stuff. In fact, that's one of the things that we're that my developers are always trying to do is like, we always say, come work for us if you want to make your head hurt. So we want to make them, we want to get them to have, they don't want to do the same thing every day. So they work for a client for six weeks to 6 months, and then they work on something else that's completely different. So that's kind of like the joy of what we do. It's a little bit of ADHD and lots of different types of customers.
Well, and just to be clear, we're not just talking software integrations. I'm going to talk about ATAC here in a
Yep.
second. I think that's a super hot topic right now. But also, you mentioned sensors, so you're doing kind of soup to nuts from software stacks to hardware integrations as well. Can
Yep.
you talk a little bit more about the hardware side of this?
Yeah, so from time to time, we have people who they have a drone, or they're using a drone and they have a sensor that they want to use, whatever the use case is. An obvious one would be like a methane sensor. And so they have an idea about how they would connect it. So whoever makes the sensor will have their own SDK, because it's all about these SDKs, or an API, which is a website, an application programming interface. So it's you're hitting a website to connect to the sensor. And what we do is we connect the dots so that that shows up in, could be the DJI Pilot app, could be a completely custom app, could be a custom version of QGC, so that whoever is using the sensor can see what the data is. And then maybe they want to take that data and turn it into a PDF, or they might want to upload it into some backend portal. Again, what we're trying to do is not have them to be carting around SD cards and making sure that they have the data manually moving from place to place. We're trying to make it as streamlined and as automated as possible, so that whoever's using your product doesn't have to understand the technology behind it. They can basically push the button, take the pictures, and then they get a report via email. That's basically what we're trying to do.
Okay, so I love how you called yourself the glue. And let me just ask you this. I'm going to deviate from the script, Godfrey, so bear with me. Who kind of is your ideal customer? In other words, what stakeholders are you working with? It sounds like you're working with drone OEMs
Yeah,
that maybe, yeah, go ahead.
at the conferences that we go to, typically we're selling to the different exhibitors.
Yeah,
So that's really they're our customers. So if we're coming up to commercial UAV, just coming off the back of Exponential, we're trying to figure out where their needs are and where they're trying to get, speed to market for whatever they're trying to do. And it's typically other exhibitors or other manufacturers or customers in the ag space, who have, or the geospatial space, who have a need and just don't have the people to be able to do it quick enough for what they're trying to do. And mostly we're talking to usually a lot of IT people, a lot of product people. I'd say the
yeah.
product people are probably the first people that we talk to. And they've come up with an idea and they're trying to execute it, and we just help execute it for them.
So do you ever have, like, hypothetically, like an enterprise client that is putting together a program that will come to you because and ask for advice on how you can help them stitch or glue something together for what they're trying to achieve from a mission standpoint? In other words, I imagine from all the shows you go to and all the companies you work with, you've got a humongous Rolodex and you know who's who in the zoo, that if someone came to you and said, "This is what I want to do," that you can help them put that all together. Do you do that too?
Yeah, it's not really what we do on a day-to-day basis, but
Yeah.
the drone space is so small. And on the
Yes.
software space, I got to tell you, the software space, we all know each other and
Yeah.
we get on pretty well. So all the different companies that do this kind of custom software, um, like largely our competitors, we kind of share information on what's going on. And sometimes um, people will have questions to say, how are you doing this? And we'll share that information. Or sometimes they have customers who they can't work with and they hand them off to us. And likewise, I just had one the other day where we had a customer who we didn't really fit their needs, and we handed it off to two of our competitors because we thought, well, we want to make sure the customer's happy. These two guys are going to do a different job than what we would do. So we help people get to where they need to get to. Because the software side seems to be, um, there's a lot of software work. So people tend to be a lot more friendly on our side of the house, and they're willing to share secrets, which is great. I hope it continues. And
Yeah.
then on the enterprise customers, because I kind of deviated from your question a bit,
That's okay.
We do get a lot of times, like we're working with a geospatial company at the moment, and they basically tell us, here's what we want to do. They have a vague idea of what they want to do, but we end up coming in as kind of like the subject matter experts to be able to tell them, here's how we would work with your data to make sure that you have a data pipeline where it's whatever information is coming in, could be from drones, could be from planes. We take that information and pass it up the data pipeline so that it gets to their customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of maps going on. There's lots of Esri going on. There's lots of Mapbox going on. And we've used all of those SDKs, and we know which cloud platforms you should be using and which products within the cloud platform you should be using so that your customer can get what they want.
Yeah, I was just recently at the Esri Safety and Security Conference, as well as their user conference for the first time ever. And that was the impression I got. There were so many people doing amazing things with GIS. There were only, if I counted them, 4 drone companies showing on the floor. And I say drone companies, 3 of them were outright OEM hardware companies. Another was Airspace Link,
Yep.
who's kind of doing
Also
that.
from Detroit.
Right, exactly. Yes. So I'm sure you're excited about Exponential next year, which is going to be in your
Oh, I
backyard.
can't wait. It's great.
I,
Yeah, there's I've seen the floor plan. It looks like there's going to be a huge Michigan pavilion, so hopefully we can get on that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, and I love the fact that you talked about working together collaboratively, even with competitors. I've and it's refreshing to hear on the software side. You're seeing that. I feel like so many times in other spaces, it's like this is my rice bowl. Never shall you come near it, kind of thing. So it's great that there's that kind of information sharing. But I want to dwell a little bit on software and the services that you provide in that space, because you mentioned Q ground control and
Mhm.
customizing that. I think is that an Alterian product?
No, Auterion, I think it's basically it's an open source product, but
It's open
Auterion,
source.
so it's basically it's drone code.
Okay.
So, but Auterion help a lot with it, but it's the drone code, so it's Ramon
Okay,
drone
Ramon
code.
Roche and the Drone Code. And by the
Yep.
way, if you're in this space, you don't know about the Drone Code Foundation, check them out. They're doing amazing things here on the software side. But why would someone want to customize the Q ground control services for their
First of
drone
all,
project?
at its most basic, you want to brand it with your colors, to make sure that you
Oh,
have your logo instead of QGC. So when somebody opens up the drone and starts flying it, it's got, the teal logo or whatever logo, so that you know that you're actually using it. The other thing, main reason that people come to ask us to customize QGC is because it's a really open interface. So you can do everything with QGC. And maybe you don't want to show all the different settings to your customer in case they change something that they shouldn't be setting. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll lock down certain pages or change the page structure and the user interface so that it's it's not too hard to understand. So if you're used to flying QGC and you just see it in a different drone, you go, okay, I'm used to this. But if you've never flown QGC before, it does have a bit of a learning curve. So we can dumb it down. Sometimes some customers ask us to use what's the SDK that is sitting underneath QGC, which is called Mav SDK, which is the
okay.
MavLink SDK.
Yeah.
So then we can build on top of that. So we can build like a completely new user interface, which looks completely different from Q Ground Control. Like a much more modern type interface with more of a kind of a DJI or a Parrot look and feel than a QGC look and feel. So we've done that for a few customers in the past too as well.
Yeah, we just had an image up there, but again, for the uninitiated, what exactly is Mav SDK? You said it lies underneath the
Yep.
QGC.
So
Well, where does it fit into this software puzzle?
so again, it's like the easiest thing to do is to just think about like the drones out of the box, like the DJI drone or the Parrot drone. So
Sure.
they have their apps that you use to fly, but
Yeah.
if you want a custom app, like most drone manufacturers, there is an SDK that you can use, which, if you think about it, is like it's a headless piece of software which allows you to control the drone, and then you put your own user interface on top of it. So what's happened with Q Ground Control is that's that's the default user interface that everybody uses on PX4 and RG pilot drones. But
Okay.
sometimes you're going to want a simpler version of Q ground control. And Q ground control is built on the Mavlink SDK, Mav SDK. So you can create your own Parrot free flight app or DJI Go app on top of the Mav SDK. And that's really basically what we did using the Mavlink SDK.
Okay, cool, cool. So basically QGC is a full user interface and the Mavlink is like the communication API between the drone and the ground control station.
You said it much better than I did. That's correct.
Okay. No worries. All good, all good. So you've done a lot in the years that you've been in business. Tell us about some of the other applications you've built with
Well,
these drone SDKs.
back to the research thing again. So
Yeah.
one of the ways that we do research is we enter a bunch of competitions. So whether that's
Oh,
a
cool.
NIST competition or a DARPA competition or a Department of Transport competition, we enter tons of different competitions. So a few years back, we were doing one of the UAS challenges, which was for first responders. And it was basically to show IoT information in a common user interface. And we thought with that we'd look at ATAC. So ATAC was there's the military version and the civilian version. So we're looking at the civilian version. And we thought that it would be the obvious way to use to display all this IoT information. So so it doesn't always happen like this, but we were very lucky. So we barely cracked open the laptop before we got a client who wanted an ATAC plugin.
Wow.
So we showed them what we'd already done with our competition for NIST, which was for the UAS challenge, and then we started working with a couple of different companies who wanted ATAC plugins. So we're doing quite a bit of that, which is really cool, and I'm hoping that that continues. There's a conference coming up in November, CivTac, so we'll be at that too as well. Hopefully, I put in a couple of sessions, so hopefully one or two of them get set up. Get accepted. So I see us doing quite a bit of that in the future. So do you know much about ATAC? Have you played with it at all?
Well, so having been in the military, I know that the military acronym ATAC was the Android Tactical Assault Kit. And
Yep,
then they civilianized it, as you mentioned, kind of that Android Team Awareness Kit. So
yep,
my basic knowledge of it is that it's that user interface that's allows you to kind of have the common operating picture or the
yep,
COP of the space that you're operating in, whether it's ground, air, sea. Just depends on what you're doing. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but that's my understanding. And it's really kind of, let's just say, blowing up in the public safety space lately,
yep,
where people are realizing, especially with all the wildfires that are happening and all the incidents across the country and the world, people are realizing like we need almost like a mobile command post type display.
yep.
And so yeah, tell me more. So Zev Nadler writes for me for Autonomy Global, and he does a lot of things in the space. He's got his own podcast called All Things TAC. And just last week on our podcast with Jack Elston from Black Swift Technologies, he was mentioning how they also are integrating TAC into some of their work as well, especially with the wildland firefighting. So tell me more.
Okay.
And like, what are the things you're doing with TAC? What are you building on top of it? How are
Well,
you making this even better for people?
I think it's worth explaining how it all fits together because this
Yeah,
seems to be an area that's confusing and it really
yeah,
shouldn't be. So if you want to use ATAC, so if you're on the civilian side, if you're the first responders, basically what you do is you download the base ATAC app. So you go to Google Play, you download the app. The thing that makes ATAC so cool is that the architecture that it uses is it's just a basic Android architecture. It's nothing special, but whoever started it really came up with a great idea that you could use what's known as a plugin to be able to fit on top of the ATAC base app, and then it basically adds more functionality. So for the first example that I had would be, the one for the IoT sensors. So we're showing all of the IoT sensors for for weather, for seismic, for temperature, for all these kind of things to allow people to see it. So we built a plugin that would take the information from whatever weather station or whatever IoT device and show it on the base ATAC app. So that's what makes ATAC so good. So you can add plugins for, you have the UAS plugin tool, which allows you to fly drones from ATAC, which is crazy how they put that in there. And
Yeah.
then you have counter UAS ATAC plugins where you can basically see where different drones are for different counter UAS manufacturers. So everybody is taking their information, and if you just install the plugin, you get to see that information too. So depending on what your needs are, you just use the base app and you keep installing all these different plugins on top of it to get satellite maps, to get chat communication. There's a couple of cool LLM apps that are out there too as well for finding information, talking to OpenAI or ChatGPT while you're using ATAC, so it will get you information from the web and condense it really easily so that you can get a much better idea about what's happening right there. Because obviously the cognitive overload when somebody's in a fire is huge. So because everybody's using the same ATAC app, it's less hard to use because people are just used to it. They know what plugins they need to download to get it going.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So we mentioned some of the different stakeholders that you work with. I imagine now that public safety or drone responders, for lack of a better term, I know I'm doing the air
Yep.
quotes, right? Because we all know that Charles Werner has his nonprofit organization of that same name, 10,000 plus strong global. Are you working more like increasingly with municipalities and public safety agencies that are looking for these
We're
ATAC
really
integration?
working with the companies that are working with the municipalities. So we worked with Aerodome in the past, where we helped them get their DF4 system up and running. We're also working with another company that's doing DF4 systems in the third world. So we've done quite a few applications where you control the drone from a website instead of controlling it from the remote controller. So we've done a lot of that too as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of the people watching this right now realize DFR is drone as first responder, but if you didn't know that, that's what that means, and that's just it's something that also is kind of making its rounds globally in terms of an operational procedure where public safety agencies will leverage drone technology when that 911 call comes in, fly that thing right out there to get eyes on situational
Yep.
awareness, to know what resources to send, to know if it's even an incident that needs a response. Yeah, of course, coined by Chula Vista Police Department, that term, and just incredible the what we're seeing now. And Godfrey, I think you're tracking this in the space too, DFR 2.0, right, with the drone in the box
Mhm.
solutions. Are you working with some of those OEMs? Again, you don't have to tell us who, but as DFR evolves, as ATAC increases, all of this converges, I think, in 2.0 for DFR. Is this a space you're also finding yourself in on your whiteboard of the next three things this
Yeah,
quarter?
we already have a couple of top clients where, again, it's manufacturers where we're trying to help them to use whatever drone SDKs that they may not be used to, because again, they're hardware people and we're the software people. Our goal is to automate all those boring jobs that nobody wants to do with drones. So obviously putting something into a box and getting it to do I don't know, anything from a warehouse inventory to just like the DO4 solution, I think is really where I see the future going. And if we can connect that with machine learning, object detection, and whatever comes out of the LLM world to get people to just talk to the drone instead of having to think about how to fly QGC. Anything that lowers the cognitive overload when you're flying a drone. Anybody who knows when they're flying a drone how much you have to concentrate, I think is really super cool.
Well, and you mentioned, something we haven't really talked about. We've been focused mostly on those drone operations and the flying of the drone and all the software interfaces that go along with that. But it's all about collecting the data, as we both
Mm-hmm.
know. Are you also involved then in terms of APIs, SDKs, working with folks on the analytics part of it on the back end? Because that's a huge software lift, especially with AI, more and more integrated into those kind of processes. Are you doing that too?
Yep, we're doing that. We're doing a lot of that. I was hoping that the drone space will be much more mature and we'd get lots more of that. Like we did a very simple cattle counting and sheep counting drone probably about 5 years ago now, because I thought that more people would want to use this. But finally, I think it's starting to happen now where people are wanting to automate as many tasks as they can. So yeah, whether it's using the latest, there is kind of like two different camps. There's TensorFlow, which is the Google camp, and PyTorch, which is the Facebook camp, the Meta camp. Yeah, we're using a lot of that more and more in the day-to-day stuff we do, and a lot of the leads that we see coming in are starting to be, hey, what can you do for us to help count things in construction sites, make it easier again so that they don't end up having to do the SD cards. So, and that means a lot of the times that means building the backend system. So we're not just on the Android side, we're building the backend systems. So we get all the way from the spectrum is we'll build the hardware. So we recently built a remote controller. We'll build the software. And then we'll build the backend cloud system and infrastructure to make sure that you've got your data pipeline all the way from the start to the finish in as easy a possible way to use so that your customer doesn't have to think too hard.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know computer vision, when you think about AI, you think about all the things we're talking about, computer vision, object identification, all things you're working in. But I want to transition over to geospatial data because we had hit on that a little bit. Obviously going hand in hand, the mapping that's happening everywhere in all kinds of contexts. I love listening to Jack Dumont from Esri. He's so inspirational when he talks about maps being the language of the world. And they truly are. Tell us a little bit more about the biggest applications for drone work in terms of GIS that you've done in that space.
There's one huge one that we're working on now that I can't really talk about, but I will tell you that we built a UTM for a company also in Detroit, not Airspace Link. So the same thing where they have a pretty interesting product, but that's probably the biggest one that we worked on.
And
so it's
UTM again
basically
for I'm sorry, Godfrey, but UTM being UAS traffic management. So that kind of airspace awareness and prioritization tool.
Yeah, so it's hilarious. We have so many TLAs, three-letter acronyms, and I throw them around thinking everybody's going to know it. From SDK to API to UTM,
Yes.
it just seems to be the nature of all industries. This is a no acronym zone. This is great.
It is. It is. I should have a little lit up sign in the back, no acronym zone. I love that. All right. Very cool. Very cool. So you're involved in UTM too. I mean, this guy is all over the drone ecosystem from every aspect of it.
The customers come to us with weird and wonderful and interesting ideas, and we're more than happy to take it on. So
yeah, speaking of weird and wonderful ideas, or I love this picture. If we can pop it up, there's like little penguins in this picture.
And that's just the remote controller. So somebody had asked us a while back to try to get an NDAA remote controller. So what we did was we just built one from scratch. We're in Oakland County, so a couple of things in Oakland County that are interesting. One is there's a big DFR presence here, so I was out visiting them the other day. The other thing that's NDAA. What does NDAA stand for?
National Defense Authorization Act. So when everybody talks about NDAA compliant, they're always referring to Section 848 of I feel like it was the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act. I could be wrong on the year. It might be 2013, but or even later. But regardless, it was really the Congress legislating on the Chinese drone ban for the Department of Defense specifically. Now, other organizations, federal and some states, have basically adopted that ban by policy. But so when you throw around the term NDAA compliant, people now equate that with the blue UAS list from Defense Innovation Unit, but they're basically talking about cyber secure drones, likely, not from specific countries of origin. That's typically what they're talking about.
So we had a customer who asked us to create a remote controller that was just unique for them, which had non-Chinese parts. So the other thing in Oakland County is the county of Oakland we're giving away 3D printers because we're a manufacturing base and they want to get more manufacturing. and they gave us a nice Markforged 3D printer. So we decided that we wanted to do more 3D printing. So the two came serendipitous together. So we created our little remote controller, and we're still working on it. But I'm hoping to get something out on our blog in the next few weeks for the version 2. So yeah, I see us doing a lot more hardware in the not too distant future, just because of some of the things that are happening that are coming out of NDAA.
Excellent. Okay, so that's really interesting. And then also kind of talking about what's new and what's next on your plate. Obviously, strong foothold in SDK is ground control interfaces. Um, Obviously, everybody's waiting with bated breath in the United States and globally for Part 108, right? The Beyond Visual Line of Sight rule. I'm doing air quotes here. I think on the horizon, we're going to see maybe one to many in that rule, possibly opening the door for some swarm management. We already talked about UTM. I guarantee UTM is going to be in that new rule. I mean, the word on the street is it's going to be in 1,000 pages or more. So as you think about that future, how are you preparing RIIS to address it?
We will have the 3 things are in the next quarter, and we will throw them like spaghetti at the wall and see which ones stick. I expect there to be ROS2 in there, some swarm stuff in there, and whatever else, BVLOS, whatever docking things come out. And then typically what we do is we do a kind of a proof of concept. And like we did this remote controller thing, we got a job out of that because somebody said, hey, I want to do that. So
I
that's
like
what
it.
happens. That's
Yeah,
how we get our work.
that's cool.
So we put them up on our blog and do a meetup. That kind of, not always, but sometimes turns into work. And that's how we kind of keep ahead of what's going on. It's the that little ADHD and a lot of my developers' brains. They want to do something different, and if they're on the bench, I always have some ideas that we can get them to work on. But essentially, whatever the market throws at us, we're probably already thinking about it, and we've probably already got some skunk works cooking to see if we can get it going.
Well, what I love about what you do, Godfrey, is not only do you kind of anticipate the future, you do it in a collaborative way, like you said, even with competitors sometimes, but you also develop the future workforce, right? So you have a strong internship program.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that because, people listening may be thinking, man, this is a person I'd want to work for or with, or I have someone over here that I know could be great with RIIS. Tell us a little bit more about that and how people can possibly plug into that.
Sure, we've been doing that for well over a decade. We found that when we hired graduates out of college, that it was kind of hit and miss whether they were going to work at all, and then that kind of gets hard because if the graduate doesn't work out, you have to let them go after a couple of years. That's a horrible way to start your career.
Yeah.
So we kind of switched everything to using interns. So we have a strong network. I teach at a bunch of colleges. People will tell me when somebody bright's coming in, and they don't have to be the most intelligent person in the class. Certainly, when my students, what I'm looking for when I'm trying to get somebody for an internship, minimum drama and get your assignments done, and an A or a B will get you in, and then we just see where it goes from there. And we usually take 4 every quarter. We have 4, 2 from Michigan and 2 from Windsor, because the University of Windsor is a very good program. So we like that too as well in Canada. And then they 50% of them will come back again. And then usually they end up, if they're back twice, as full-time employees. And we have people who came in that route. They were in high school and they're still with me 10 years later. So that's really what we're doing. I find that interns, when they come in, tend to stay longer than graduates. So, our average intern, once they take an employee, is, like 5 years. So it's great for everybody. They get to work in the workplace in a place that they're comfortable, in a nice environment. And then, we get to keep them longer. So it's a kind of a win-win situation. And if anybody's interested, just hit me up on LinkedIn. We don't tend to do, on the hardware side, we don't tend to do a lot of remote interns, but on the software side, we have done remote interns in the past. It's easier.
Okay,
But yeah,
that's
we're always
awesome.
interested, and a lot of it's word of mouth. I'll have like cousins, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law tell me all this stuff about, hey, we've got this super bright kid who you might be interested in talking to. It's like, yeah, bring him in as an intern, and if it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. They get some experience, And if it does work out, then that's great.
That is great, and I know from personal experience when I was in the JAG Corps for the Air Force, the Air Force had a formal intern program. I don't know that they have the money for that now, but honestly, I would take almost anybody. There was one year I had 7 interns. People like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Hmm.
Like, these are kids that wanna know how to I even took a girl, a young lady from high school, from, college. Usually I have, like, law student, right, interns, and the majority of them became JAGs because they got to experience it and see what it was like working in that office, and like you said, it's a win-win, right? We get to know them, they get to know us, it's awesome. So, thank you for doing that. I love that you do that for, kind of developing the next generation of the tinkerers that are becoming the glue of this industry. So tell us now, Godfrey, as you look in your crystal ball, besides like the 3 things on your whiteboard or the spaghetti that you're going to throw, what are the big things you see coming up next as we kind of get close to our time here together? And then please, please, please close us out with any other thoughts you have and how people can reach you and learn more.
Sure. So what is coming up in my crystal ball? Well, I see the Parrot UKR as being something that we're hoping to get some clients in the next year. So we're trying to get into how that works. There's a new SDK out, which is very interesting. So we're definitely investigating that. I think that when we were doing our meetup, so the Parrot UKR, so it's the new Parrot Ukrainian drone. So that
Oh,
was
the
released.
French company Parrot.
Yeah, that was
Okay, gotcha.
released. So that's already NDAA, and that was released at the Paris Air Show, which I believe was last month.
Yep,
So that's cool. So we're already getting some interest from a couple of different companies on that, because it's a good replacement for DJI. I see a lot of ROS 2 stuff coming in. I told you we do this meetup, and we did a very simple ROS 2 meetup, and we doubled our membership. So there's obviously a lot of ROS 2 being robotic operating system.
yep,
So with flying PX4 drones, you tend to use QGC and MAV SDK, but you can also use this ROS2, the ROS operating system. So I see that as being huge. I see some swarms there. I also see, the obvious thing that everybody's talking about is LLMs, large language models, so ChatGPT. We're
yep.
doing a lot of work on using large language modules to automate a lot of the work that we do internally. And I see a lot of people, if you're not doing that, you're going to be out of business.
Totally.
Um,
I won't mention who, but I know someone's applying to medical school, hypothetically speaking. And one of the questions on one of the applications was, did you use AI at all for this application? And honestly, if I was evaluating that application and someone said no, I'd be like, you're an idiot. Like, you're
yeah,
not coming in here because you're not going to be, you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, you're not up with the times. Like, it's like you're not using a calculator to do complex math.
I did
Um,
teach a class at Kettering University on LLMs, and I demanded that I'd make the assignments harder, and I demanded they use his ChatGPT to do the assignments. So I probably was the only professor who actually liked to have that.
yeah.
But yeah, that's really what I see. A lot of this, I see LLMs being huge in this space, really, but I don't know what that's going to mean, the same way as I don't really know what machine learning is going to mean. But we'll still keep kicking out proof of concepts and seeing if we can help people get to their killer app. Really, that's what we're trying to do.
And Godfrey, I understand, kind of going back to that workforce development and what's happening in the future. You're also developing some other training program more geared towards customers.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've done in the past, like for Ford Credit, so we don't always just work with drone companies. We also work with some local Southeast Michigan companies here, Detroit
Yep.
companies. So for Ford Credit, what we did for them, which I'm starting to push out there to see if people are interested. So as the drone space explodes, I don't think there's any reason why we can't take our internal training program and start offering it to other people as a kind of a service model. So what we did with Ford Credit was they had a really weird stack of development that they were trying to use. So we took 6 graduates, gave them a 6-week training course, and then put them into Ford Credit. And they kept them for 6 months, and then basically after the 6 months, they turned them into Ford employees. And that worked really
Wow.
well. So out of the 6 people, 5 of them worked out. So that's a pretty good model, I think, for people who are
That's
trying to, the real issue is in the space that we're in is the people who have a lack of knowledge trying to get up and running. So
Yep.
I think if we could take that and put this into the drone world, I think that's kind of an interesting model that we'd like to kind of put out there to see if people want to do it.
Yeah, I love that. You're I'm gonna make up a word like university-fying, kind of internships and training programs for people as like a direct pipeline. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
everybody complains about not being able to find the talent. It's like we figured out how to find the talent, and we're quite happy to help other people too.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. All right, we are at time, Godfrey. I knew our time would fly. Talking about all the amazing things you're doing. I know next up for you, you're doing a panel at Commercial UAV. I think my producer Mike Peel is going to be with you. He's a partner in crime behind the scenes for a lot of the work you do and your podcast as well. Super excited to see that and cover that. By the way, everybody, Godfrey and RIIS are vendor partners of Autonomy Global. So look for some articles, and they've got their ads up on our site. But as we close out, Godfrey, any last comments, and how can people reach you and learn more?
So the easiest way to get to me is on RIIS.com on our website, or RIIS.com. And then if you want to learn more about the software side of stuff we do, come to meetup.com and find the drone software meetup, and we can start the conversation there too as well. And LinkedIn, it seems to be where I live these days, on LinkedIn, like everybody else.
All right, very good. And reminder to everybody out there, if you're coming to Commercial UAV, fly in Monday on Labor Day. We're going to have another, I think it's going to be our 5th annual Flash Mob Networking Happy Hour Monday evening. More details to follow, hopefully partnering with Carasoft again. And God willing, Spandex Nation will be playing at Carnival Court. So more to follow. Stay tuned. But that's all she wrote. Thank you so much, Godfrey, and everybody out there. We are out here.